Morning.
Okay, right now. Ali's with us. Now I'm Neelu Berry-Chowdhury with Lee Kant and Anthony Stansfeld, and we are discussing the situation that I have at 450 New North Road, IG6 3EB, the Lloyds Banking Group criminal convictions in 2018 by the FCA and the Thames Valley Police. As the Crown Commissioner there, Anthony Stansfeld. So, Anthony, do you want to start with any updates? So I've only got one update, that there's going to be a hearing on the 5th of December at 10 AM in the Central London County Court in H1 PP 8822, which is my application to dismiss the possession claim. So where I have a fraudulent instrument that said that my application to dismiss the possession claim had been dismissed by His Honour Judge Dyke, I now have an email, which I will forward to you, which says that it in fact is going to be heard on the 5th of December. So I'm just going to ask you if I should ask the court, apply to the court to transfer it to the criminal court now. We have an opportunity to do so. Over to you, Anthony.
Well, if you can get it over to a criminal court, I'd advise it, because my experience has been that you always lose these cases in civil courts. And the only big fraud that has really been unravelled was the Thames Valley one taking on HBOS over Reading, and that had to go to a criminal court. If the individuals had taken it through a civil court, they would have all lost the cases. There is far too much collusion between the judges and the chambers of the barristers on the putting the bank's case. And I think some of the cases have been absolutely appallingly dealt with by the judges. And whether it's utter incompetence or it's corruption is sometimes difficult to tell. But when the evidence is clearly there and the judges refuse to look at it very often, and we know that something like 700 cases of banks using forged documentation have been taken to the National Crime Agency. But 2 3/4 years ago, the National Crime Agency has done precisely nothing about any of these cases. And just like the Financial Conduct Authority has done absolutely nothing about either the very comprehensive Sally Marston Turnbull report, which they received several years ago, which laid out clear disgraceful behaviour and actual corruption within Lloyds Bank and some very senior bankers, all of whom were named. Not one single one of those cases has the FCA taken forward or the NCA taken forward. And these organisations that are meant to regulate seem to be far more to cover up than anything else at the moment. And your case is just one of, I would say, probably thousands that falls into this category.
Yeah, so do you think it could be, I mean, I did file a private prosecution in the Thames Magistrates Court in April, 1st of April this year, when they issued the possession claim. And I copied it to the Snaresbrook Crown Court and the Central Criminal Court. And I asked, the Central Criminal Court passed it to the Southwark Crown Court. Now that's where the those HBOS, the ones who were jailed, out of the many that were not jailed, that they tried to reduce their sentences and failed. So there's already a precedence of the jurisdiction of the Central Criminal Court. Do you have any information? Because they've put a ban on that transcript when they failed to reduce their sentences. That's a big one. You know, do you know if where the original trial was held? Was it in the Central Criminal Court?
Well, the HBOS Reading case was held in the Southwark Court, but I'm not a lawyer, so the detailed rules and regulations that the barristers and judges come up with, I'm not an expert in, so it's very difficult for me to say anything on this. But what I do know is that if it goes through a civil court, everybody loses. If it goes to a criminal court in front of a jury and the evidence is there, which it usually is in most cases, then you will get a conviction. But the judges and barristers and the banks will move heaven and earth to stop it getting into a criminal court, because they know that a jury looking at the facts are going to find people guilty. And that is why so few cases ever get in front of a criminal court.
But I saw something in the civil procedural rules recently. I will put it in the link with this video. And it said that all civil proceedings must be stayed if there is any evidence of a crime. And so this must be very recent, that people maybe are not aware of it, and they don't publicize these kinds of laws, just like they don't publicize the Criminal Law Act 1967 Section 4, which makes it mandatory to make public these transcripts of these criminal prosecutions, as well as there is another law, the Crime International Cooperation Act 2003, which actually does seize the assets and cease the trading of these banks. I think the problem might be that because the banks are registered in America, that the UK would have to use the international laws to get the banks bankrupted.
Well, it's almost impossible for a private individual or a small company that's been bankrupted to get this through the courts. And said, the barristers for the banks from the very big legal London practices ring absolutely circles around this. And so they can ignore the law, as far as I can see, with absolute impunity. And the judges absolutely fail to uphold the law in the civil courts.
So can we just state that the bottom line is that there is no effective criminal justice system in the UK, so it can't be called a democracy.
Well, there is a criminal system, and the CPS should take the cases forward. But the problem is, I mean, you know, the absolute classic example was when Thames Valley took on the HBOS case. They threw lawyers against Thames Valley in an unprecedented way, and it cost us £7 million to investigate that case and get it up into a criminal court and take the case through. The judge, the Financial Conduct Authority, who then fined Lloyds Bank an initial 65 million, it should have had at least a 1 nought on it, that fine, but then reduced it to 45 million because Lloyds cooperated. Well, they certainly didn't cooperate with Thames Valley Police, I can assure you. That fine, that money went absolutely straight to the Treasury. I wrote to the Home Secretary, not the Home Secretary, the Chancellor, which was Hammond, and said, would you like to pay us back? And we got a very dusty reply saying no. Well, the one lesson that came out of that case was that no police force can afford to take on a major fraud case. It is simply too expensive, and they get no financial support for doing so. And even when the perpetrators are heavily fined, none of the money is paid back to the prosecuting police force. So no police force in this country can afford to take on a major fraud. And the problem, I mean, Thames Valley is one of the biggest police forces in the country. How can a small police force take it on? And the other easy out, I'm afraid, for the police is that no fraud is committed in no big fraud is committed in one police area. You'll find the victim is in one area, the accountants are in another police area, the bank is in another police area, and so it goes on. And so there's a very easy sloping of the shoulders to avoid responsibility for taking a case on. And you see this, I'm afraid, with the regulatory authorities. It'll be punted around between the Financial Conduct Authority, the National Crime Agency, the City of London, Action Fraud, and the Prudential Regulation Authority, the PRA, and nobody will take the case on. They just shovel it around. So no major fraud is investigated today. And there's been a very good speech by Lord Prem-Seeker in the House of Lords over the last 2 days, I think, in which he lays this out fairly clearly what is going on, and it is utterly disgraceful. And the City of London Police, I can see no purpose in its continued existence whatsoever in its present form.
Okay, I'll just pass over to Lee Camp in case he's got some questions to add to our discussion. Lee?
Nothing at this stage, Nilu, but you've got all the evidence you need. your case is very solid. You've done a lot of work cross-referencing and proving everything. And as Anthony has explained many times, that all the current systems and all the current government bodies that are supposed to carry out duties have failed. So even with someone like the best case in the world, which you've got, where do we take it to get remedy for you? Who will, it almost appears like we have to go to such a high jurisdiction, even above the Crown level, in order to get to petition that to take your case on.
Yeah, so we're back to the budgeting of the funds, or the money. The Chancellor of the Exchequer is not allocating enough funds for the Home Office to do these investigations. I mean, you only need one proper investigation that sets the precedence to all other. With criminal law, it's very simple. If you can get it right in one case, it settles all other cases. So since that particular prosecution in 2018, we can use that precedent and say all possessions claims by that bank since that date are null and void in law because of the criminal precedent. So that is, it is the financial system, I think, is rigged deliberately to allow the criminal networks to control the honourable people and our honourable leaders. Over to you, Anthony.
I think there is a problem. I think the problem is the sheer weight of lawyers that the banks can put into court. And even if you do win a case in a civil court, it's immediately appealed and then appealed and appealed again. And there was one case, a big one, where I think it went through about 5 stages of law cases. And eventually a judge said to the poor defendant, or the bank petitioned the judge and said, our expenses have come to several £million. Will you make sure that he guarantees our expenses if he loses the case? Well, of course he couldn't guarantee a multi-million pound case like that. And it's very easy. I mean, I saw the advice from the MP Mel Stride, who was the last chair of the Treasury Select Committee. And his advice was to somebody, he says, well, take it to a solicitor and take it to court. Well, how on earth can you do that if you've just had all your money stolen off you through fraud? You've got no money to take it through a court. And unless the police take it on, or one of the regulatory authorities come on, you're absolutely stuck. And that has happened to literally, I would say, probably tens of thousands of people in this country who've just given up. And the only people who've got compensated are those out of the HBOS Reading case. And Lloyds has had to pay out several hundred million over that. But the HBOS Reading case was a microcosm of what was going on out of other banks. It was going out of a spectacular scale out of RBS in Scotland, out of Gega Bank, RBS, and it was going out from Lloyds from a number of branches, notably Gresham Street, Leeds, and in Bristol. So this is a scam, a fraud system that has been working for some years now, and nothing has been done about it.
So in my particular situation now, there is footage of conversations between myself and Michael, we called the police to arrest these men because they didn't have a warrant, and the police basically arrested me and Michael for obstructing the High Court enforcement officers who were not from the High Court, and they didn't have a warrant, so the police couldn't have arrested us, which is what Sergeant Betts told them. Why have you brought them here if you haven't got a warrant? I can't put them on the system. And what he should have said was arrest those other men. So I'm just wondering, the trigger for arrest in the UK is 0.
Well, the police act totally unlawfully sometimes. And the trouble is the young police constables who are sent off to do an eviction or something certainly don't know what the law is. And the bailiffs pretend they know what the law is. It's a lot of thugs very often. And the police cooperate with them. And I think some police forces, I don't know how much is ignorance and how much is corruption, but I have no faith whatsoever in the Metropolitan Police at a local area level to uphold the law whatsoever when it comes to, forced repossession of houses and properties. They don't know the law usually, and they seem to be just in the hands of the bank's barristers and the bailiffs when they should be enforcing the law and stopping them behaving like this. It is totally, utterly wrong at the moment.
But the precedences of that prosecution by the HBOS in 2018 should have the power to arrest all bailiffs and police who've aided and abetted in the theft of homes since that 2018 date.
Well, you say that, but the police simply are not going to prosecute. And very often, and we've gone through a stage now where the police have become more like social workers in many police forces, which a lot of the senior police officers rather enjoy. It stops them doing any proper work. So criminal cases like major fraud are totally ignored. And if the police won't take it on, who else will take it on? Because the regulatory authorities won't take it on, and the private individuals simply don't have the money to take on a bank. And a bank, when it spends tens of millions of pounds on defending cases and everything, it is not the very often, in my view, corrupt directors of the bank who are paying the bill. It is the shareholders of the bank. So it is, I mean, Lloyds, I gather, spends, I think, over 800 million a year on legal fees to lawyers. And it goes to certain big London practices like Herbert Smith Freehills. And they love these cases because even if the defendant wins, they will immediately advise the bank to appeal it and they get more fees. And the poor person the bank is taking on, and nobody's got deep enough pockets to take on a bank properly unless this is done in a criminal court. And this is why these civil courts are an absolute travesty of justice at the moment.
And what about this criminal charge of contempt of court then? If civil courts are sitting dealing with criminal matters, whilst there have been criminal prosecutions, the civil courts are in contempt of the criminal courts, surely. There's a law against that, surely.
Well, I mean, if the police are not going to prosecute it through the CPS, and the CPS is not going to stand up and prosecute it, and a private individual can try and get it through into a criminal court, but the chances are it'll be turned down and you won't get it into a criminal court. And, who's going to pay for it, taking it through the criminal court? I mean, it's a very expensive process, this. And frauds are the most difficult thing really to prosecute. And said, if you're up against a bank, they will throw senior barristers at you and QCs, and it'll be very difficult to win it. I mean, I can remember just sitting in court at Southwark with the HBOS case. And I mean, the number of barristers, senior lawyers sitting in the room, I think I counted 12 sitting there. And this is very expensive stuff. So how is a private individual going to get justice when however clear the evidence is, if nobody takes the case on? If the police won't take it on, the CPS won't, and the regulatory authorities won't, you cannot afford to take on a case in a criminal court, or even you won't even get it as far as a criminal court in most cases. And this is the underlying injustice of this at the moment.
I believe, but Lee maybe correct me wrong if I'm wrong, is the military having a function here to do to stop these crimes against the most vulnerable? It's usually women, families with children, old women, whistleblowers. Surely we need protection. Whistleblowers must be protected. I do have 22-year history of whistleblowing as a pharmacist.
And if you want to look at a whistleblower case, the classic one was that of Sally Masterton, who worked for Lloyds. They always say she worked for HBOS. That is not the case. She was a Lloyds lawyer. Lloyd's senior accountant, and she was asked to write a report about what had gone on, and she produced the Turnbull report. And she was immediately sacked for doing so without proper compensation. And it took myself and Lord Hollick about 3 years to get the bank. The bank lied throughout. They said that her report wasn't authorized. Well, I had the letters between their head of audit and risk and Sally Masterton discussing the report. They said that she was slightly unbalanced, and that certainly wasn't the case. And it said that it was unsubstantiated. It was totally unsubstantiated. And the Financial Conduct Authority hid the report for 3 years without doing anything about it and allowed her to be sacked. It is the most disgraceful episode, you know, in financial things that has happened in the last 10 years, and nobody's been held to account for it. So let's stick to the absolute facts that we know on this one.
But the financial system is rigged to provide the finances for the criminals to win. That's the problem, isn't it? The other bankers who should have been jailed got away, and now the bank is still continuing with its crimes against whistleblowers, which is you know, just carrying on. So what was the point of having a criminal justice system if it doesn't work?
Well, it clearly doesn't work in the civil courts at the moment when it becomes to major fraud, and that is absolutely true.
And then the only thing we can do is, again, to reset the financial system so that there is money to prosecute criminals, so that whistleblowers have a voice. We don't have a voice in England. Whistleblowers, the common sense doesn't overrule the nonsense. That's the problem.
No, I mean, if the regulatory authorities and the police can't step in or won't step in, then there's very little a private individual can do. I mean, the 700 cases of banks using forged documentation to bankrupt companies and individuals has sat with the NCA, as I said earlier, for over 3 years. Nothing has been done about it, in spite of it being absolutely clear. People signing personal guarantees when they clearly weren't in this country, or it wasn't even that, looked nothing like their signature. Bank employees were signing personal guarantees. And this goes on right throughout the system. And it is hugely corrupt. I mean, another trick that has been played is opening bank accounts in company names, lending that bank account large sums of money, 10 or 15 million, charging it 19% interest when the poor company didn't know about the bank account, didn't need the money, and then suddenly announcing that the interest has run up to 2 or 3 million or something, and pulling the mat on a company. And again, there is ample evidence of this happening. And again, nothing is done about it. I mean, the Financial Conduct Authority and the City of London Police are both a complete disgrace. And what I find quite extraordinary, I actually briefed in person Andrew Bailey when he was the boss of the Financial Conduct Authority. And he knew all about it. He was well briefed on this. He did absolutely nothing and has now gone on to run the Bank of England. And I find that utterly extraordinary.
Yeah, I'll just bring in Lee, just on the point of the, you know, resetting of the financial system. Lee?
Just before that, Nilu, could we get a copy of the Sally Marsden report? Is that available to the public, Anthony?
It is available, yes.
Yes.
It came out in rather oddly. Said the Financial Conduct Authority hid it, and there's no other word, they deliberately concealed it. I actually had a copy when I was the Police and Crime Commissioner of the Thames Valley, and I couldn't release it under the rules. I longed to do so. It was released, however, by one of the defendants who was found guilty in the HBOS case, and he had a copy. And he sent that to his MP, and the MP sent it to Kevin Hollinrake, who chaired the APPG banking, and he published it and it went out. So it is out. I don't know if I can dig it out of my files, but I had it in its unredacted original form, and it is utterly damning. And in fact, really all you need is the summary, which is over about 3 pages, which sums it up absolutely beautifully. I can probably take a photos of that and just send it to you. I'm not sure if I've got it
Thank you.
in another form.
Are there other reports that have discovered fraud available to the public, or
No,
they?
The trouble is they are hidden. There's one
Okay.
devastating report, I gather, it's devastating, I've never been able to read it, called the Atwood Report, which again has been carefully concealed and nobody will release it. It is obviously, I say, it would appear to be so devastating, they're not prepared to release it into what was going on in Lloyds Bank. The other report, thing that has got to come out is the judge, Dame Linda Dobbs's report into what went on in Lloyds and HBOS. That has been now going on, I think, for 5 years. It hasn't reported yet. And I think it's being done properly, but I think it's one of these ones that every time they turn up, turn over a stone, they find another bag of worms. So it's got bigger and bigger. And it has cost a huge amount of money, that report by Lloyds. But the trouble is, when it eventually reports, it will go to Lloyds, and Herbert Smith Freehills, their lawyers, will sit on it for months and months and months, redacting it. And unless somebody leaks it or leaks the summary of it, it's going to be very difficult to get hold of that report, I think. So the banks and regulatory authorities hide the reports into these things. And as I said, if it wasn't for one of the defendants in the HBOS case, who incidentally was found guilty, releasing it, we wouldn't have seen the Turnbull report. But it names the names of the people responsible. Far too many of them are now sitting in the House of Lords, I might point out. And it also names the companies that were involved in this.
And the 17 or 20 other people that were involved in the HBOS crimes, they were never convicted, even though there was evidence proving that they had guilt or some connection to the frauds. So they then went on and continued doing more crime.
I think that is probably the case. I mean, the HBOS case had a number of what was called Operation Hornet, and it had a number of stages. And I think, there were up to something like 9 stages. Well, as far as I know, they have not, except for about stages 1 to 2 or 3, which resulted in the court case, none of the other ones have been properly investigated. And I think the answer is probably Thames Valley were running into the fact that this was costing so much money that they actually started pulling out of investigating it further. I mean, I left Thames Valley 18 months ago. I don't know what has happened to those cases. I have asked and I haven't had a clear answer.
And it seems that they will never provide a clear answer. It seems to be covered up very well and thoroughly, and a lot of money has been paid to make sure that these people are being protected. And a lot of money is being paid secretly to cover up lots of crimes.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's being paid to individuals. I doubt it. I mean, I very much hope nobody's paying the police. The City of London, in the Metropolitan Police. I'm not so sure about that. I'm reasonably confident it's not happening in Thames Valley, which that particular case went across. But don't forget, Thames Valley took on the case. 2 other police forces had already turned it down and had the Serious Fraud Office. They were not prepared to take the case on. And as I said, that's why it cost Thames Valley this huge sum of money when I was the police commissioner for Thames Valley. And I give full marks to the Chief Constable, Sarah Thornton, for allowing the case to go right the way through. Now, Nilu, I said I got to leave at past. I'm afraid I do.
Yeah, you did, yeah. You do. Thank you so much, Anthony. And
Okay. And
I'm really grateful for your help. Thank you very much.
What are you actually doing with this now, as a matter of interest, that now, you know, you've recorded it? What happens to those recordings?
I'll keep it unlisted until you check it and say that I can put it out. Is that fair? I can edit it as well. I can edit bits out.
No, well, there's nothing I said that I would regret. I don't think there at all. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.